Her billionaire husband beat her and tore her clothes after his mother accused her of having an affair with a servant. His mother laughed, "Let's see if any beggar will take you." But after she made just one call, 30 minutes later, 11 Rolls-Royces were lined up outside. "Hi, my beautiful and loyal family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter's family, the home where hearts rise together. May the universe wrap every woman, Michelle, Oprah, Serena, Beyonce, Ava, Viola, Rihanna, or Maya, in unstoppable strength, unshakable confidence, and a light so bright it turns every obstacle into opportunity. May every tear these women have shed water the roots of greatness. Every challenge they face transform into power, and every silent struggle blossom into triumph. You are the warriors of your own destiny, the heartbeat of your communities, the creators of legacies that cannot be denied. May your spirit rise above doubt, your dreams conquer fear, and your soul shine with courage that inspires everyone around you. My precious family, your presence tonight fuels this home. A like is a spark of encouragement. A comment is a shout of unity. This is Mission 1000 likes for every black woman, Michelle, Oprah, Serena, Beyonce, Ava, Viola, Rihanna, Maya, who refuses to settle, who rises every single day, and who shines even when the world overlooks her. If your spirit is unbreakable, like this video, if your heart walks in courage and power, comment, "I'm with Mr. Peter." Blood doesn't wash out of silk easily. Susan Murphy made sure Mara learned that lesson on her wedding night. The cathedral bells had barely stopped ringing when Susan cornered her future daughter-in-law in the bridal preparation room. Mara stood before the mirror in her custom Vera Wang gown, the train spreading behind her like fresh snow, when the door clicked shut with a sound that felt too final. "Before you walk down that aisle, we need to have a conversation." Susan's voice was honey over razors. She placed a leather folder on the vanity. "Sign this." Mara's hands trembled as she opened it. The document was brief but devastating. A contract stating that Mara Slick would never reveal her true identity, her wealth, or her work as the Queen of New York for a minimum of 1 full year following the marriage. "I don't understand. Why would you—" "Because my son stood on the balcony of our estate last week and told me if he couldn't marry you, he'd throw himself off it." Susan's manicured fingers drummed against the marble countertop. "He gave me no choice, so now I'm giving you one. Sign this and marry him, or walk away and save us all the heartbreak of discovering what you really are." "What I really am. My mother put every asset in a blind trust under her maiden name to protect me from people like you. I live simply because I want to, not because I'm hiding. I love your son. Love." Susan laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Love doesn't pay mortgages or build legacies, dear. If you truly love Jonas, you'll prove you can be the wife he needs without hiding behind whatever money or power you think you have. 1 year. Just 1 year of being nothing more than his wife. If your love survives that, then perhaps I was wrong about you." Mara thought of Jonas waiting at the altar, thought of his grey eyes and the way he held her like she was made of prayer and starlight. She thought of the suicide threat he'd made, the desperation in his mother's face beneath the cruelty, and she signed. "Smart girl," Susan purred, tucking the contract into her Hermes bag. "Now let's get you married." The ceremony was a fairy tale. 500 guests filled the cathedral, flowers cascading from every surface, a string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon as Mara walked down the aisle. Jonas wept when he saw her. He said his vows like he was promising his soul, not just his life. But the fairy tale shattered at the reception. Susan orchestrated it perfectly. During the mother-son dance, she pulled Mara aside for photographs, insisting on an embrace for the cameras. As she pulled Mara close, she tipped her champagne glass, full of vintage red wine, directly down the front of Mara's pristine white gown. "Oh my goodness!" Susan's gasp was theatrical perfection. "How clumsy of me! Darling, I'm so sorry." The wine spread across the silk like blood. Guests turned, murmuring. Camera flashes erupted. Mara stood frozen as the stain seeped deeper into the fabric, into her skin, into the beginning of her new life. "It's fine," Mara managed, her voice barely audible. "Accidents happen." "You're so gracious," Susan cooed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Most brides would be hysterical. But then again, it's just a dress, isn't it? Just a dress that cost more than most people earned in a year. Just a dress that Mara's mother Amelia had handpicked, that seamstresses had spent months perfecting. Just a dress that now looked like a crime scene." Mara excused herself to the bathroom, fighting tears. When she returned, wearing the backup dress she'd thankfully prepared, the reception was in chaos. "My bracelet!" Susan was shrieking at the center of a crowd. "My grandmother's bracelet! The 50-carat diamond, it's gone!" Security rushed over, guests backed away from tables, and Susan's eyes landed on Mara with laser precision. "She was the only one near my purse." Susan pointed a shaking finger at Mara. "When we took those photos, she was right beside the table where I left it." Mara's stomach dropped. "I didn't touch your purse. I would never—" "Search her bridal suite," Susan demanded. "Please, I don't want to believe it, but that bracelet is priceless. It's been in the Murphy family for generations." The head of security looked apologetic, but firm. "Mrs. Murphy, if you'll accompany me to your suite." The walk down the hallway felt like a death march. Guests whispered. Jonas followed, his face pale and confused. They searched every drawer, every bag, every pocket. Nothing. The bracelet wasn't there. "I'm so sorry for the confusion," the security chief said. "There's no evidence—" "Wait." Susan patted her coat pockets dramatically. Her face shifted from anguish to relief. "Oh, thank God! It must have slipped into my pocket when I grabbed my purse earlier. I'm so relieved." No apology to Mara. No acknowledgement of the public accusation. Just Susan clutching the bracelet to her chest while guests murmured about the close call and poor Susan's scare. Jonas took Mara's hand. "I'm sorry about my mother. She's just stressed about the wedding." Mara wanted to scream that this wasn't stress. This was warfare. But she squeezed his hand and smiled. "It's okay. Everything's okay." The lie tasted like ashes. Their honeymoon suite at the plaza was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, rose petals scattered across Egyptian cotton sheets, champagne chilling in silver buckets. Jonas made love to her with such tenderness that Mara almost forgot the wine stain, the false accusation, the contract hidden in Susan's purse. Almost. Afterward, while Jonas slept, Mara sat in the marble bathroom and stared at the pregnancy test she'd packed on a whim. Her period was late, just by days, but she knew her body like she knew her own heartbeat. 2 pink lines appeared. Pregnant. Joy flooded through her, so intense she had to cover her mouth to keep from waking Jonas with her sobs. A baby. Their baby. Everything would be okay now. Susan would have to accept her once there was a grandchild. This changed everything. She was still crying happy tears when she heard Susan's voice through the wall. The honeymoon suite shared a connecting door with the adjacent room. Susan had insisted on staying nearby to help with wedding details. Mara hadn't thought anything of it until now, until she heard her mother-in-law's voice crystal clear through the thin barrier. The wine stain was perfect. The bracelet accusation even better. Susan was on the phone, her voice sharp with satisfaction. "She held up well, I'll give her that. But don't worry, I give it 1 year maximum. The baby will be the final test." Mara pressed her hand over her mouth, hardly breathing. How did Susan know about the baby? "I found the test wrapper in the trash when I delivered the wedding gift. Then I checked her toiletry bag while she was in the shower. 2 pink lines. She's definitely pregnant. Mara's been looking queasy all week. I knew she'd test tonight or tomorrow. Now we wait. 9 months, and I'll have everything I need to destroy her completely." The phone clicked off. Footsteps moved away from the wall. Mara sat on the cold bathroom floor, the positive pregnancy test in one hand, her other hand pressed against her still flat stomach. Susan had planned this. All of this, the humiliation tonight, was just the opening act. And somehow, impossibly, Susan had known Mara was pregnant before Mara herself had confirmed it. Mara looked down at the test again. The two pink lines blurred through her tears. She'd signed a contract to hide her power for 1 year. She'd promised to be nothing more than Jonas's wife, to let Susan test whether their love could survive without the shield of Mara's wealth and influence. But Susan wasn't testing love. She was waging war. And Mara had just walked into the battlefield unarmed. Through the wall, she heard Susan humming. It sounded like a lullaby or a funeral dirge. Mara stood slowly, washing her face, hiding the pregnancy test in her toiletry bag. When she returned to bed, Jonas pulled her close in his sleep, murmuring her name like a prayer. She held him tight and stared at the ceiling until dawn broke over Central Park. The game had begun, and Mara didn't even know all the rules yet. Chapter 2. The first cut. Susan Murphy didn't just plant seeds of doubt, she watered them with Mara's tears. 3 months had passed since the wedding, and Mara's body was transforming in ways that filled her with wonder and terror in equal measure. Her belly curved gently beneath loose dresses, her breasts tender and full, morning sickness hitting her in waves that left her clinging to toilet bowls and bathroom sinks. She was radiant and miserable, glowing and exhausted, desperately in love with the child growing inside her. She'd told Jonas the night after their honeymoon. His reaction had been everything she'd dreamed: tears, laughter, spinning her around the bedroom until she was dizzy and breathless. He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to her stomach, whispering promises to a baby too small to hear them yet. Susan's reaction had been different. "How wonderful," she'd said, her smile sharp as a blade. "I'll arrange for the best doctors, of course. We'll make sure this baby has everything it needs." The emphasis on this baby had sent ice down Mara's spine, but Jonas had been too happy to notice, too busy planning nurseries and picking out names, too consumed with joy to see the calculation in his mother's eyes. Mara continued her secret work as the Queen of New York, slipping out while Jonas was at the office to meet with the families and businesses that needed her. She saved a Puerto Rican restaurant in the Bronx from foreclosure, paying off their predatory loan and connecting them with honest investors. She stopped an elderly black veteran's eviction, buying his building outright and establishing rent control. She funded a scholarship program for undocumented students, arranged legal representation for asylum seekers, donated medical equipment to underfunded hospitals. The work exhausted her, especially with the pregnancy, but it also kept her sane. When she was the queen, she remembered who she was beneath the role of Jonas's wife and Susan's target. She came home one evening to find Susan waiting in the living room, her face etched with concern that looked almost genuine. "Darling, you look exhausted," Susan said, rising from the velvet sofa. "Where have you been?" "Just running errands." Mara set down her purse, careful to keep her expression neutral. "Errands." Susan's eyes flickered to Mara's clothes, simple, nondescript, nothing like the designer pieces that filled her closet. "You're pregnant, Mara. You should be resting, not gallivanting around the city doing God knows what." "I'm fine. The doctor said light activity is healthy." "Of course." Susan's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I just worry. Jonas would be devastated if anything happened to you or the baby. We both would." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Susan was watching her. Mara excused herself, claiming fatigue, and retreated to the master bedroom. She didn't see Susan's smile widen as she left, didn't see her mother-in-law pull out her phone and review the private investigator's latest report, tracking Mara's movements throughout the city. The strike came on a Tuesday morning. Jonas kept emergency cash in his office safe, $50,000 for last-minute business deals, investment opportunities that required immediate action. It was a habit from his father's days running Murphy Enterprises, a tradition he'd maintained. That morning, the cash was gone. Susan discovered it, of course. She always discovered things. She'd gone into Jonas's office to leave him a note about a charity gala and noticed the safe door slightly ajar. When she opened it fully, she found the empty cash envelope with Jonas's handwriting scrawled across it. She called them both into the office, her face streaked with tears. "I didn't want to believe it," Susan said, her voice breaking perfectly. "After the bracelet incident at the wedding, I told myself it was just paranoia. But now this?" Jonas looked between his mother and wife, confusion written across his features. "What are you talking about?" Susan held up the empty envelope. "The 50,000 from your safe. It's gone." "Gone?" Jonas crossed to the safe, checking it himself. "That's impossible. I was just—" He stopped, thinking. "I haven't checked it in weeks, actually. But who would—" "I found this," Susan said quietly, pulling a designer purse from behind her back. One Mara recognized immediately, the Birkin bag Susan had given her last week as a gift, insisting every Murphy wife needed at least one Hermes piece. Susan reached into the bag and withdrew the empty cash envelope. The room went silent. Mara felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "I didn't put that there. I've never even used that purse. It's been sitting in my closet since you gave it to me." "Then how did it get there?" Susan's tears fell harder. "Jonas, I hate doing this. I hate doubting her. But first the bracelet scare. Now this. What if there's a pattern?" "There's no pattern," Mara's voice rose. "Someone is setting me up. Can't you see that?" Jonas ran his hands through his hair, his face pale. "Mara, I know you didn't take the money, but we need to figure out how that envelope got into your purse." "I'll tell you how," Mara said, turning to Susan. "You put it there. Just like you knew exactly where to find your bracelet at the wedding. You're manufacturing all of this." Susan gasped, clutching her chest. "Why would I do such a thing? You're carrying my grandchild. I want nothing more than for this family to work." "Do you?" Mara stepped closer. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been trying to destroy me since the moment I said yes to your son." "Mara, that's enough." Jonas's voice was quiet but firm. "My mother isn't perfect, but she wouldn't fabricate evidence against you. That's paranoid." The word hit Mara like a slap. Paranoid. He thought she was paranoid. Susan seized the opening. "Sweetheart, pregnancy hormones can make women feel very anxious, very suspicious. Maybe Mara should talk to someone, a therapist who specializes in prenatal mental health." "I don't need a therapist." Mara wanted to scream, wanted to grab Jonas and shake him until he saw what his mother really was. But she couldn't. Not without breaking her promise to Amelia, not without revealing that she could buy and sell the entire Murphy fortune before lunch. The contract she'd signed on her wedding day was a cage, and Susan held the key. Jonas pulled Mara into his arms, stroking her hair. "It's okay. We'll figure this out. Maybe someone on the household staff, maybe someone had access to both the safe and your purse. We'll investigate." "I believe you, Mara. I do." But his voice wavered just slightly on the last words. Susan watched them embrace, and over Jonas's shoulder her eyes met Mara's. The message was clear. 2 strikes, 1 more, and even my son won't be able to ignore the pattern. That night, Mara lay awake beside her sleeping husband, one hand on her growing belly. The baby kicked for the first time, a flutter so faint she almost thought she'd imagined it. Then it came again, a gentle tumbling that made her breath catch. Life, growing inside her, innocent and perfect and completely dependent on her protection. "I won't let her win," Mara whispered to her unborn child. "I promise you, baby. I won't let her take you from me. I won't let her destroy this family." But even as she made the promise, doubt crept in. Susan had outmaneuvered her twice now. What would the 3rd strike be? How far would this woman go to drive Mara away from Jonas? And the question that terrified her most, would Jonas's love survive whatever Susan planned next? Mara closed her eyes and tried to sleep. The baby kicked again, as if answering. "Hold on, little one," Mara thought. "Just hold on." The storm was coming, and neither of them was ready. Chapter 3. The architect of ruin, Dr. Patricia Vance, sold her soul for $2 million, and Susan Murphy bought it with a smile. 3 days after Jonas and Mara returned from their honeymoon, Dr. Patricia Vance sat in her Manhattan office, staring at the letters spread across her desk. Each one demanded payment, each one threatened consequences. The gambling debts had started small, a few hundred at underground poker games, then a few thousand at private tables, then tens of thousands at high-stakes games where the players wore watches worth more than her annual salary. Now the debt was crushing, $1,800,000 owed to people who didn't send polite reminder notices. They sent men with scars and empty eyes who made house calls and left behind broken fingers as receipts. Dr. Vance had 2 children, a daughter in private school and a son starting college. Her ex-husband who'd disappeared years ago, leaving her to carry everything alone. She was an excellent doctor, respected in her field, but respect didn't pay debts to loan sharks. The knock on her office door made her jump. "Dr. Vance, you have a visitor. She says it's urgent." Susan Murphy entered like she owned the building, which Dr. Vance would later learn she partially did through a web of investments and shell companies. She wore Chanel and carried a leather folder that looked expensive enough to solve half of Dr. Vance's problems. "I'll be direct," Susan said, settling into the chair across from the desk without being invited. "You're in trouble. Serious trouble. The kind that doesn't end with bankruptcy. It ends with your children identifying your body." Dr. Vance's mouth went dry. "Who are you?" "Someone who can make all of this disappear." Susan opened the folder and withdrew photographs. Dr. Vance's daughter walking home from school, her son laughing with friends outside a coffee shop. "Beautiful children. It would be a shame if your poor decisions destroyed their futures, or their lives." "Are you threatening my children?" Dr. Vance stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm offering you salvation." Susan's voice was calm, almost kind. $2 million, every debt paid, your children safe, your career intact. All I need is your cooperation on one small matter." "What matter?" Susan slid another document across the desk. "My daughter-in-law is 3 weeks pregnant. The baby is my son's. But I need you to be her obstetrician, and when the time comes, I need you to confirm that a DNA test says exactly what I tell you it says." Dr. Vance felt sick. "You want me to falsify medical records? That's illegal. I could lose my license. You could lose much more than that if the people you owe come collecting." Susan leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to hurt anyone, just to adjust some test results. The woman in question will never know. The baby will be healthy. Everyone gets what they want. Except the truth." "The truth," Susan said softly, "is whatever I decide it is. Now, do you want to save your children, or shall I leave you to the mercy of the men who've been asking about your daughter's school schedule?" Dr. Vance looked at the photos of her children, thought of the threats she'd received, thought of the sound her colleagues' fingers had made when the debt collectors broke them last month as a warning. She thought of her Hippocratic oath and felt it shatter in her chest. "What do you need me to do?" Susan's smile was triumphant. Smart woman. The same week, Susan visited Raymond Torres at the genetic testing laboratory where he'd worked for 15 years. Raymond was a good man, a careful technician, a devoted father to his daughter Camilla, who'd been diagnosed with leukemia 6 months prior. Camilla needed a bone marrow transplant. The matching donor had been found, but the procedure cost $400,000. Raymond's insurance covered barely a quarter of it. He'd started a GoFundMe, organized bake sales, begged family members who had nothing to give. His daughter was dying, slowly, painfully, while he watched helplessly. Susan arrived at his apartment on a Saturday afternoon when Camilla was napping and Raymond sat at his kitchen table surrounded by medical bills he couldn't pay. She didn't threaten. She didn't need to. She simply placed a check on the table for $400,000. Raymond stared at it like it was a hallucination. "What is this?" "Your daughter's life," Susan said. "The transplant can be scheduled immediately. The best doctors, the best facility, full recovery care, all paid for." "Why would you—" "I don't understand." "Because I need something very simple from you." Susan sat across from him, her hands folded neatly. "In a few months I'll bring you 2 DNA samples. You'll test them and provide me with results showing a specific paternity match. That's all. One falsified report, and your daughter lives. Raymond's eyes filled with tears. I can't. That's my career. That's everything I've worked for. Your daughter is everything you've worked for. Susan's voice gentled. I've researched you, Raymond. You're a good father, a good man, and good men sometimes have to make impossible choices to protect the people they love. If I get caught, you won't. I'm very thorough, and even if something went wrong, I'd make sure you were protected. Legal representation, relocation funds, whatever you needed. Susan pushed the check closer. Or you can send this back to me and watch Camilla fade away over the next year while you wonder if you could have saved her. Raymond picked up the check with shaking hands. He thought of Camilla's smile, the way she still tried to play even when she was so weak she could barely stand. Thought of her asking him last week if she was going to die, her 8-year-old eyes too knowing, too afraid. When do you need the results? His voice cracked. I'll let you know. Susan stood, smoothing her skirt. Use the check. Save your daughter. And remember, you owe me everything. She left him sitting at the kitchen table, the check in his hands, his soul already bartered away. Present day. Mara was 6 months pregnant now, her belly round and prominent, her movements slower but still graceful. She'd felt the baby moving regularly for weeks, little kicks and tumbles that made her laugh and cry simultaneously. Jonas was obsessed, spending every evening talking to her stomach, reading stories to the child they both already loved desperately. Susan watched them with predator's patience. She'd assembled her team. The doctor was bought. The lab technician was owned. Now she needed the final piece. Christian Okafor arrived at the Murphy estate on a cold morning, his interview scheduled for a household position. He was 28, beautiful in the way that made people stop and stare, with high cheekbones and warm eyes, and an accent that lilted musically. He was also desperate. He'd immigrated from Nigeria on a work visa that was expiring in 3 months. His family back in Lagos depended on the money he sent home. His mother, 3 younger siblings, cousins and aunts and uncles who'd pooled their resources to send him to America for a better life. Without work, he'd be deported. His family would lose their only lifeline. Susan hired him on the spot. You'll assist with household duties, she explained, leading him through the mansion. Mrs. Mara Murphy is pregnant and needs help. You'll bring her meals, assist with errands, whatever she requires. Christian was grateful, professional, completely unaware that he was a pawn in a game he didn't know was being played. Susan positioned him perfectly. She sent Christian to deliver Mara's breakfast each morning, always when Jonas was already at the office. She arranged for Christian to help Mara with tasks that required reaching or bending, simple kindnesses that looked different through Susan's carefully angled cameras. The cameras were hidden throughout the house, in the library, the sitting room, the hallways. Susan had installed them months ago, telling Jonas it was for security purposes. He'd agreed without question. Now Susan collected footage like a hunter collecting trophies. Christian steadying pregnant Mara on the stairs when she felt dizzy, captured. Christian laughing at Mara's joke while helping her move boxes in the nursery, captured. Christian's hand accidentally brushing Mara's when passing her a glass of water, captured. Every innocent moment, every kind gesture, every natural interaction between employer and employee, Susan recorded it all. Then she spent hours editing, cropping, adjusting angles, until innocence looked like intimacy. A photo of Christian helping Mara reach a book became them standing too close, gazing at each other. A video of Mara thanking Christian for his help became them having a private moment, their voices low and conspiratorial. Susan built her evidence methodically, frame by frame, lie by lie. Christian noticed nothing amiss. Mara treated him with the same kindness she showed everyone, helping him improve his English, asking about his family, ensuring he felt welcomed and respected. She had no idea Susan was transforming every smile into a weapon. One evening, Jonas came home early and saw Christian leaving Mara's bedroom, carrying a tray from her afternoon tea. Jonas's expression flickered, just for a second, with something dark. Susan materialized beside her son like smoke. "I hired Christian to help Mara since she's so tired from the pregnancy," Susan said, her voice carefully casual. "They've become quite close. I didn't want to worry you, sweetheart, but I've noticed them spending a lot of time alone together." "Mother, don't start," Jonas said, his jaw tight. "I'm not starting anything. I'm just observing." Susan patted his arm. "I'm sure it's perfectly innocent. Mara would never... she's carrying your child. Of course she wouldn't." The seed was planted. Jonas watched Christian leave, watched Mara emerge from her room looking refreshed and happy, and felt something ugly twist in his chest. Doubt, just a whisper of it, just enough to take root. Susan smiled to herself as she walked away. The pieces were all in position, the board was set, and Mara, kind and trusting and 6 months pregnant with the child Susan would use to destroy her, had no idea the trap was about to spring. Chapter 4. The Stairs and the Setup. Gravity is an unforgiving mistress, but not as unforgiving as Susan Murphy. Mara's 7th month of pregnancy brought a kind of contentment she'd never known. Despite Susan's constant presence and the lingering suspicion that her mother-in-law was orchestrating something darker than she could see, Mara felt complete. The baby moved constantly now, strong kicks that made her gasp, rolling movements that distorted the shape of her belly, hiccups that made her laugh out loud. Jonas was tender beyond measure, refusing to let her lift anything heavier than a book, insisting she rest while he handled every detail of the nursery preparation. They'd painted the room a soft yellow, neutral, peaceful, perfect for the child they'd decided to surprise themselves with at birth. Mara continued her work as the queen when she could, though the pregnancy limited her mobility. She made phone calls, transferred funds, coordinated relief efforts from behind a laptop screen. She saved a community center from closure, funded a legal clinic for immigrants, established a scholarship fund for teenage mothers trying to finish school. She came home exhausted but fulfilled, her secret intact, her promise to Amelia unbroken. She didn't notice Susan studying her with the focus of a jeweler examining a diamond's weakest point. The stairs were marble, imported from Italy, with an iron railing that curved elegantly from the 2nd floor to the grand foyer below. 12 steps in total, each one smooth and beautiful and utterly unforgiving. Susan had studied them for weeks. She'd measured angles, tested her balance, calculated precisely how to fall without causing damage she couldn't recover from. The key was commitment. Hesitation would make the fall look staged. She needed to sell this performance with her body, her blood, her bones if necessary. Her son's love was worth a broken wrist, worth cracked ribs, worth whatever pain she had to endure to remove the woman who'd infected his life. She waited for the perfect moment. A Thursday afternoon when Jonas was in meetings across the city, when the household staff were occupied in the kitchen, when Mara was upstairs in the library looking through baby name books. Susan positioned herself on the 3rd step from the top, her hand loosely gripping the railing. She'd practiced this motion a dozen times in her own room. The key was to throw herself backward while simultaneously crying out, making it seem like a loss of balance rather than a deliberate act. She heard Mara's footsteps approaching the stairs. Deep breath. "Oh, Mara dear," Susan called out, her voice light. "Do you have a moment? I wanted to show you something about the nursery furniture." Mara appeared at the top of the stairs, one hand supporting her lower back, her belly prominent beneath a soft cashmere sweater. "Of course, let me just—" Susan threw herself backward. The scream that tore from her throat was genuine because the pain was real. She hit the 4th step with her shoulder, her head snapping back against the marble. Then she was tumbling, the world spinning, her body making sickening contact with each unforgiving surface. She felt her wrist bend wrong, felt something crack in her ribcage, felt the brutal kiss of marble against her hip, her knee, her elbow. She landed in a heap at the bottom of the stairs, her vision swimming with stars. Worth it, she thought through the agony, all worth it. "Susan!" Mara's voice was pure horror. "Oh my God, someone help!" Mara started down the stairs as fast as her pregnant body would allow, reaching out toward Susan. "She pushed me!" Susan wailed, her voice ragged with pain and triumph. "Mara pushed me down the stairs! She tried to kill me!" Mara froze, her hand still extended in help. "What? No! I was at the top. I didn't touch you!" Household staff came running. The cook, the housekeeper, the gardener, all of them witnesses to Susan crumpled at the bottom of the stairs, Mara standing frozen above. "Call an ambulance!" Susan gasped. "Please! She pushed me. I don't know why. I was just talking to her about the nursery and she—" A sob cut off her words, perfectly timed. "That's not true!" Mara descended the rest of the stairs, kneeling beside Susan despite her bulk. "You fell. I saw you fall. I didn't touch you." But Susan's eyes were already telling a different story to the gathered staff. Eyes that said she was afraid. Eyes that begged for protection from the dangerous pregnant woman towering above her. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Paramedics immobilized Susan's neck, checked her vitals, loaded her onto a stretcher. Her wrist was already swelling to twice its normal size, her face bruised where it had struck the stairs. "My son," Susan whispered to the lead paramedic. "Please call my son. Tell him I'm scared. Tell him Mara." She let the sentence die, let the implication hang. Jonas met them at the hospital, his face white with shock. He found his mother in the emergency room, surrounded by doctors, her right wrist bent at an unnatural angle, 2 ribs cracked, a concussion, bruises blooming across her skin like violent flowers. "Mom." He took her good hand, his voice breaking. "What happened?" Susan's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time because the pain medication hadn't kicked in yet. "I don't want to say. I don't want to cause problems between you and Mara." "Tell me what happened." "I was on the stairs, talking to her about the nursery furniture. I was showing her something on my phone, and then I felt hands on my back, just for a second, and I was falling." Susan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Jonas, I think she pushed me." "That's impossible. Mara wouldn't. She's 7 months pregnant, for God's sake. Why would she push you?" "I don't know." Susan's sob was theatrical perfection. "Maybe she's angry about the money accusation. Maybe she thinks I'm trying to come between you. Maybe the pregnancy is affecting her mind. Hormones can do strange things. I've read about pregnant women experiencing rage, paranoia." "Stop," Jonas said, but his voice lacked conviction, because doubt was already eating at him. The missing money, the envelope in Mara's purse, Christian spending so much time alone with his wife, his mother's warnings about Mara's suspicious behavior. And now this. The hospital staff collected statements. 4 employees, the ones Susan had been paying extra under the table for months, reported hearing raised voices before the fall. The cook said she'd noticed tension between Mara and Susan lately. The housekeeper mentioned Mara had seemed stressed and irritable. All lies, carefully cultivated. The security footage was the final nail. Jonas watched the recording, the angle Susan had specifically chosen when installing cameras, showing Mara standing at the top of the stairs and Susan suddenly falling. The position of Mara's hand suggested reaching out, but the edit Susan had made removed the crucial seconds, showing Susan throwing herself backward. It looked damning. Jonas drove home in silence, his mother's broken wrist and bruised face haunting him. He found Mara in their bedroom, pacing frantically, her hand on her belly. "Jonas, thank God. How is she? I swear I didn't—" "The doctors say she'll recover," Jonas interrupted. "Broken wrist, cracked ribs, concussion. I know this looks bad, but you have to believe me. I was at the top of the stairs. She was walking down and she fell. I tried to reach for her, but I was too far away. I would never hurt your mother no matter how much she what?" Jonas's voice was sharp. Mara caught herself. "How much she dislikes me. I know she does, Jonas. She's been setting me up since the wedding, the wine, the bracelet, the money, and now this." You think my mother threw herself down a flight of marble stairs just to frame you? Jonas laughed, the sound bitter and disbelieving. Do you hear how paranoid that sounds? I'm not paranoid. She's manipulating you. She's in the hospital with broken bones, Mara. She could have been killed. They stared at each other, the gap between them widening into a chasm. Do you believe me? Mara asked quietly. Jonas wanted to say yes, wanted to wrap his arms around his pregnant wife and promise that he trusted her completely. But he looked at her and saw the envelope in her purse, saw Christian leaving her bedroom, saw his mother falling down the stairs while Mara stood above. I don't know what to believe anymore, he whispered. Mara felt something crack inside her chest. Get out! Mara, get out! Her scream startled them both. If you can't believe me, if you think I'd hurt your mother, hurt anyone, then get out of this room right now. Jonas left. Mara collapsed onto the bed, her hands pressed against her belly. The baby kicked frantically, sensing her distress. I'm sorry, little one, she whispered through tears. I'm so sorry. Your grandmother is a monster and your father doesn't believe me, and I don't know how to protect us from this. But even as she cried, rage was building beneath the grief. Susan had gone too far. Accusations and missing money were one thing, but throwing herself downstairs to frame Mara. That wasn't just manipulation. That was war. And Mara was done playing defense. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to a number she'd been avoiding for months, her brother Elijah's private line. I need you to investigate Susan Murphy, everything. I want to know every secret, every crime, every lie, and I want it done quietly. Can you help? The response came within seconds. Always. Tell me what happened. Mara started typing. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. Hold on, Mara thought. Just hold on a little longer, because when this was over, Susan Murphy would learn what happened when you tried to destroy a queen. Chapter 5. The Birth and the Betrayal. Mara Sleek brought life into the world on a Tuesday and lost everything by Friday. The contractions started at midnight, pulling Mara from sleep with pain that stole her breath. Too early. She was only 8 months along, still had weeks before her due date. But the baby had other plans. Jonas rushed her to the hospital, his hand gripping hers, his voice steady, even though she could see fear in his eyes. You're okay. The baby's okay. Everything's going to be fine. Dr. Patricia Vance met them in the delivery room, her professional smile hiding the guilt that had been eating at her for months. She'd taken Susan's money. She'd agreed to the plan. But actually seeing Mara in labor, seeing this woman's trust and vulnerability, made her stomach turn. Let's bring this baby into the world, Dr. Vance said, her voice carefully cheerful. The labor was intense, but swift. 6 hours of contractions that felt like her body was being torn apart, Jonas holding her hand and whispering encouragement, nurses coaching her breathing, Dr. Vance monitoring the baby's heartbeat, and then a cry. Perfect and piercing and the most beautiful sound Mara had ever heard. It's a girl, Dr. Vance announced, placing the infant on Mara's chest. Mara looked down at her daughter and felt the entire universe reorganize itself around this tiny, perfect creature. She had Jonas's grey eyes and Mara's rich brown skin, a shock of dark hair and the smallest fingers Mara had ever seen. She was beautiful. She was everything. Zara, Mara whispered, the name they'd chosen together. Her name is Zara. Jonas was crying openly, his hand gentle on his daughter's head. She's perfect. You're perfect. I'm sorry for everything, for doubting you, for the stairs, for... Shh. Mara pulled him close, the three of them a unit, a family. We're okay now. Everything's okay now. For 2 days the hospital room was paradise. Jonas barely left, except to handle work emergencies. He held Zara for hours, tears streaming down his face as she wrapped her tiny fingers around his. He changed diapers, learned to swaddle, paced the room singing lullabies off-key. Mara nursed their daughter and felt something settle in her chest. A fierce, primal protectiveness that went beyond anything she'd ever experienced. This child was hers, hers to protect, to love, to shield from anything that threatened her. Even Susan couldn't destroy this. Even Susan's schemes couldn't take away what they'd created. Mara was wrong. Friday morning arrived with Susan. She swept into the hospital room with Jonas, his two brothers Marcus and David, and Dr. Vance. Susan's wrist was still in a cast, her bruises faded but visible. She looked at Mara, holding Zara, and something flickered across her face, triumph mixed with disgust. "We need to talk," Susan said, her voice cold. Mara pulled Zara closer instinctively. "About what?" "Show them, Patricia." Dr. Vance opened a folder with shaking hands. She wouldn't meet Mara's eyes as she passed documents to Jonas. Jonas read silently, his face draining of color. He read it once, then again, then a third time, like he was trying to make the words say something different. "This can't be right," he whispered. "What can't be right?" Mara's heart was pounding. "Jonas, what is it?" He handed her the paper, a DNA test result. Professional, official, stamped with the laboratory's seal. Paternity test results for infant Zara Murphy, alleged father, Jonas Murphy, 0% match. Excluded as biological father. Biological father, Jonas Murphy, 0% match. Excluded. Note: genetic markers are consistent with samples provided from Mr. Christian Okafor. The world stopped. "That's impossible," Mara breathed. I've never touched Christian. I've never touched anyone but you, Jonas. This is fake. This has to be." "I had the test done twice," Susan interrupted, pulling more documents from her purse. "2 different laboratories. Both came back with the same results. That child you're holding is not my son's daughter." "She's lying." Mara's voice rose, causing Zara to startle and cry. She rocked the baby automatically, her mind reeling. "Jonas, you know me. You know I would never—" "Do I?" Jonas's voice was hollow. "Because I thought I knew you wouldn't push my mother down the stairs. I thought I knew you wouldn't steal money from my safe, but now—" Susan produced an envelope of photographs. "I didn't want to show you these, sweetheart. I hoped the DNA test was wrong, but after the results came back, I had to tell you everything." She spread the photos across the hospital bed. Mara and Christian in what looked like intimate embraces. Christian leaving her bedroom at night. The two of them standing close in the library, their heads together, as if sharing secrets. Christian's hand on Mara's belly. All of it edited, manipulated, innocent moments, transformed into evidence of an affair that never happened. "These were taken over the past few months," Susan said. "I installed security cameras for protection. I never imagined they'd capture this." "Those photos are fake." Mara was shaking now, Zara wailing in her arms. "Everything is edited. Jonas, please, you have to believe me." But Jonas was staring at the photos, at the DNA results, at the baby in Mara's arms, who had grey eyes but whose paternity, according to medical science, belonged to someone else. "Where is Christian?" Jonas asked, his voice dead. "Gone," Susan said. "I confronted him 3 days ago with the DNA results. He confessed everything and fled. My investigator tracked him to Ghana. He took the money Mara gave him and ran." "I never gave him money. I never touched him." Mara stood despite her post-delivery weakness, holding Zara against her chest. "This is all Susan's manipulation. She bribed the doctor. She paid for fake DNA tests. She edited those photos." Dr. Vance stepped forward, her face professionally blank. "Mrs. Murphy, I conducted the DNA test myself. I witnessed the sample collection from both the baby and Mr. Murphy. The results are accurate." The lie tasted like poison on her tongue, but Susan's $2 million and her children's safety kept her voice steady. Mara looked at Dr. Vance and saw something flicker in the doctor's eyes, guilt, maybe, or shame. But it was gone too quickly to be certain. "Jonas," Mara pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Look at me. Look at our daughter. You know the truth. You know I love you. You know I would never—" "Let me see her," Jonas said quietly. "What? Let me see the baby." Jonas, no, let me see her. His roar made everyone in the room flinch. Mara's arms tightened around Zara instinctively, but Jonas stepped forward and pulled the baby from her mother's arms. Mara screamed, an animal sound of pure anguish that brought nurses running. Jonas held Zara, this tiny creature he'd believed was his daughter, and looked at her grey eyes and saw a stranger's child, saw betrayal in perfect baby form. "She's not mine," he whispered. "She is." Mara reached for Zara, but Marcus and David stepped between them. "Give me my baby. Jonas, please give me my daughter." Dr. Vance pulled a syringe from her medical bag. "Mrs. Murphy, you need to calm down. For your own safety, don't you dare sedate me. Don't you—" The needle went into her arm. The room tilted. Mara's legs gave out, and Marcus caught her, lowering her back onto the hospital bed. She fought the medication, tried to stay conscious, reached desperately toward Jonas and Zara. "Please," she sobbed, "please don't take my baby. Jonas, please, I love you. I love her. Please don't." But Jonas was already walking toward the door, Zara in his arms. Susan leaned over Mara's bed as the sedative dragged her under. Her whisper was ice and venom. "Christian has already fled to Ghana with the money I paid him. No one will believe you. You're alone, and you just lost everything." Mara's last conscious thought before darkness took her was crystal clear. "I'm going to destroy you. Every single one of you." Chapter 6. Torn. They say silk tears with a whisper, but Mara Slick's world ripped apart with a scream that shook the heavens. The hospital discharged Mara 2 days after Susan's ambush, her body still bleeding from childbirth, her breasts engorged with milk for a baby she wasn't allowed to feed. The nurses looked at her with pity mixed with judgment. They'd heard about the DNA test, about the affair with the household staff, about the infant who belonged to another man. Mara had called Jonas 37 times. He'd answered none of them. She'd texted, begged, pleaded for just one chance to explain, one moment to see Zara, one opportunity to prove the DNA test was manufactured. Nothing. The cab driver who took her home from the hospital kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, clearly recognizing her distress, but wisely staying silent. When they pulled up to the Murphy estate gates, Mara's stomach dropped. The gates were closed, and in front of them stood a crowd. Susan, Jonas, his brothers Marcus and David, household staff lined up like soldiers, and, because Susan had made sure of it, 3 reporters with cameras and a dozen neighbors who'd been tipped off that drama was coming. Mara paid the driver and stepped out onto the street, her simple dress hanging loose on her post-pregnancy body, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. She looked nothing like the radiant bride who'd walked these grounds months ago. She looked destroyed. "Jonas." She approached the gates, her voice cracking. "Please let me in. Let me see our baby. Let me explain." Jonas stood behind the iron bars like they were prison walls. His face was stone, his eyes empty. He wouldn't look directly at her. Susan stepped forward, immaculate in Chanel, holding a check and a folder of papers. "There's no point in theatrics, Mara. Take this and disappear. It's more than generous considering the circumstances." Mara looked at the check. $100,000. "I don't want your money," she said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "I want my daughter." "That bastard child isn't yours anymore," Susan said, her voice carrying across the crowd. Cameras flashed. Neighbors leaned closer. "The courts will determine custody, but I assure you no judge will give a child to a woman who committed adultery while pregnant and tried to pass off another man's baby as my son's. I didn't commit adultery. The DNA test is fake. Jonas, please." Mara tried to push past Susan to reach the gate, to reach her husband, to make him see. Susan grabbed Mara's blouse with her good hand, the cast on the other wrist making the gesture even more dramatic, and ripped the fabric straight down the front. The sound of tearing silk echoed across the street. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. Mara stumbled backward, her hands flying up to cover herself. But the damage was done. Her nursing bra was exposed, milk already leaking through the fabric, because her body didn't understand that her baby was gone. Her post-pregnancy belly showed, soft and vulnerable, stretch marks visible in the harsh daylight. Look at her, Susan's voice rang out. This is the whore who tricked my son, who brought shame to the Murphy family, who tried to trap us with another man's child. Mara's knees hit the pavement. She tried to cover herself with the torn pieces of her blouse, humiliation burning through her like acid. The reporters were eating it up, cameras clicking non-stop, questions being shouted. Mrs. Murphy, is it true you had an affair? Where is Christian Okafor now? Did you know the baby wasn't Jonas's when you gave birth? Susan advanced on Mara like a predator scenting blood. She grabbed Mara's skirt and tore it at the seam, the fabric giving way with another terrible ripping sound. Mara fell completely now, her torn clothes hanging off her body, milk and blood and tears mixing together. She looked up and saw Jonas standing motionless behind the gate, his brothers flanking him, all of them watching her destruction without moving to stop it. "Jonas," she whispered. "Please." He turned his face away. Susan slapped Mara across the face, hard enough to split her lip open. Blood ran down Mara's chin, dripping onto her torn blouse. "Let's see if any beggar will take you now, you filthy—" Mara pulled out her phone. The crowd went silent, confused by the gesture. Susan paused mid-sentence, thrown off her script. Mara's hands were shaking so badly she could barely dial, but she managed. One call. Just one. The phone rang twice before her mother answered. "Mother," Mara said, her voice surprisingly steady, despite the blood and tears and torn clothes. "It's time. Come." She hung up. Susan laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Calling Mommy? How pathetic! What's she going to do, Mara? Come collect her disgraced daughter?" Mara looked up from the pavement, blood on her lips, milk soaking through her exposed bra, her clothes in tatters around her body. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, deadly. "You should have killed me when you had the chance, Susan, because what's coming for you now is so much worse than death." Susan threw the $100,000 check at Mara. It fluttered down like a butterfly and landed in a puddle near Mara's knee. "Take your blood money and disappear," Susan spat. Mara didn't pick it up. She sat in the street in her torn, bloody clothes and waited. The crowd murmured. Neighbors exchanged confused glances. Jonas shifted uncomfortably. Marcus whispered something to David. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 20. Susan grew impatient. "Well, where's your rescue, darling? I don't see anyone." The ground began to rumble. At first, Mara thought it was just her imagination, trauma making her sense things that weren't there. But then everyone else felt it too, a vibration through the pavement, growing stronger with each second. Car engines, multiple engines, growing louder. The crowd turned as one to look down the tree-lined street. Coming toward them in perfect military formation were 11 Rolls-Royce Phantoms, each one pristine white with gold trim that caught the sunlight like fire. They moved in synchronized precision, their engines purring with wealth and power. They stopped in front of the Murphy gates in a perfect line, and the doors opened. From the first vehicle stepped a woman who made the crowd collectively gasp. Amelia Slick was 63 years old and looked like African royalty. She wore a crimson gown that cost more than most people's houses, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists and ears. Her hair was wrapped in an elaborate head wrap of gold fabric, her makeup flawless, her presence commanding. She walked directly to her daughter without acknowledging anyone else. Mara looked up at her mother through tears and blood, and Amelia's face, usually so composed, cracked with fury and grief. "My baby," Amelia whispered, kneeling in her couture gown on the dirty pavement to wrap a pure cashmere coat around Mara's torn body. "My sweet baby girl, what have they done to you?" Then came Mara's brothers. Elijah stepped out of the second Rolls-Royce, 6'4" and imposing in a custom suit. He was CEO of Slick Enterprises, controlling assets worth more than $40 billion. His face when he saw his sister's condition went from shock to volcanic rage in seconds. Isaiah emerged next, a federal judge whose decisions shaped legal precedent across the country. Then Tobias, who owned more Manhattan real estate than any other private individual. Then Caleb, whose media empire controlled newspapers, television stations, and digital platforms across 3 continents. Finally, Micah, head of the largest private security firm in North America, a man who'd personally protected 2 presidents. Behind them came an army, Gabriella Rossi, the most feared attorney in New York who'd never lost a case in 20 years. James Wellington, former Secret Service, now head of Mara's personal security detail. Dr. Audrey Chen, the city's top medical examiner, and 30 more. Assistants, bodyguards, lawyers, staff. The Murphy family and their gathered crowd stood frozen, mouths hanging open. Amelia helped Mara to her feet, keeping the cashmere coat wrapped around her daughter's body. When Mara stood, the Queen of New York revealed herself. "You wanted to know who I really am?" Mara's voice carried across the silent street, stronger now, powered by her mother's presence and her brother's fury. "I'm Mara Slick, the Queen of New York, the woman who saved 10,000 families from financial ruin, the woman who owns the building your company leases, Jonas, the woman who holds the debt on every Murphy asset." Jonas's face crumbled. "Mara, don't." The word cut like a blade. "You chose to believe lies. You chose to stand silent while your mother beat me in the street. You chose to take my daughter from my arms without even questioning whether the evidence was real." Susan stepped forward, trying to regain control. "This is absurd. These people are just—" Gabriella Rossi moved like lightning, crossing the distance between the Rolls-Royces and the gates in seconds. She was a small woman, barely 5'2", but she radiated power. "Jonas Murphy," Gabriella said, serving him with a thick folder of legal documents. "Full custody hearing scheduled for 48 hours from now. Immediate freeze on all Murphy family assets pending litigation, $500 million defamation lawsuit, and a restraining order. You are not to come within 500 feet of baby Zara or Ms. Mara Slick." She turned to Susan and served her next. "Criminal investigation into fraud, conspiracy, assault, and extortion. The district attorney will be contacting you shortly. I'd recommend getting a very good lawyer." Mara turned to face Susan fully now, the cashmere coat transforming her from victim to victor. "You wanted to see if any beggar would take me?" Mara's smile was ice. "Let me show you what a queen does to those who dare touch her crown." Micah handed her a tablet. On the screen, bank records showing Susan's embezzlement from Murphy Enterprises, $4.2 million over 5 years. Photos of Susan with State Senator Richard Castellano in hotel rooms, his wedding ring visible in several shots. Emails between Susan and Dr. Vance discussing DNA fraud. Text messages between Susan and the lab technician Raymond Torres. Transfer records showing payments to Christian Okafor. "I have everything," Mara said softly. "Every lie, every crime, every secret. And by tomorrow morning, so will every news outlet in New York, every investor in Murphy Enterprises, every bank you owe money to, and the FBI." Susan's face went white as bone, but Mara wasn't finished. She turned to Jonas, and the crowd saw her heart break in real time. "You broke my heart," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying in the absolute silence. "You took my child. You stood silent while I bled in the street. I could forgive betrayal from your mother. She never loved me. But you promised to protect me. You promised to choose me. And when it mattered most, you chose her." Jonas fell to his knees. "Mara, please, I didn't know." "You didn't want to know. There's a difference." Amelia guided Mara toward the first Rolls-Royce. Before the door closed, Mara looked back at Jonas one final time. "You have 48 hours to prepare for the custody hearing. Use them wisely, because when I walk into that courtroom, I'm taking my daughter, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." The door shut with a soft final click. The 11 Rolls-Royces pulled away in perfect formation, leaving the Murphy family standing at their gates like refugees. Jonas knelt on the pavement where Mara's blood still stained the concrete. Susan stood frozen as police sirens grew louder in the distance. Marcus whispered to David, "We're finished." The cameras caught everything, and somewhere in the lead Rolls-Royce, Mara Slick held her mother's hand and let herself cry, not tears of defeat, but tears of rage that would fuel the reckoning to come. Chapter 7. The Queen Rises. Queens don't beg for mercy at the feet of peasants. They burn the kingdom down and rebuild it in their image. The war began before the Rolls-Royces even reached Slick Tower. Elijah made the first call from his vehicle, his voice cold and precise. "Execute protocol scorched earth. I want every Murphy asset identified and targeted within the hour. Banks, investors, contractors, suppliers, everyone pulls out simultaneously. Make it look like natural market forces, but make it devastating." From the second car, Tobias was already on his phone with the real estate consortium. "I want every property lease the Murphys hold. Find the clauses. Find the violations. We're terminating everything." Caleb's fingers flew across his tablet in the third car, sending encrypted messages to editors at every major publication in New York. "Run the exposé on Susan Murphy. Front page. All of it. The embezzlement, the affair, the DNA fraud. I want her face on every newsstand by morning." Mara sat in the lead vehicle with Amelia and James Wellington, her head resting against her mother's shoulder, the cashmere coat still wrapped around her torn clothes. "We should get you to a doctor," Amelia said softly, wiping blood from Mara's lip with a silk handkerchief. "You need medical attention. You just gave birth 3 days ago." "I need my daughter," Mara interrupted. Her voice was hoarse from screaming, but her eyes were clear. "That's the only thing I need. Everything else can wait." James leaned forward from the front seat. "The custody hearing is in 48 hours. Gabriella is already building the case. We have Christian Okafor's location in Accra. My team is bringing him back to testify. Dr. Vance's financial records show Susan's payments. The lab technician Raymond Torres is ready to confess in exchange for immunity." "What about Zara?" Mara's hands twisted in the coat. "Where is she right now? Is she safe?" "She's at the Murphy estate with Jonas and Susan," James said carefully. "We have surveillance on the property. If they try to move her or leave the state, we'll know immediately." Mara closed her eyes, imagining her daughter crying for milk she couldn't provide, reaching for a mother who wasn't there. 48 hours, she whispered. "Okay, 48 hours, and then I get her back." The first 6 hours were surgical precision. Every bank holding Murphy loans received the same message. Concerns about the company's financial stability, questions about asset valuation, requests for immediate audits. When 3 major banks pulled their lines of credit simultaneously, panic rippled through Murphy Enterprises. Every investor received anonymous packages containing evidence of Susan's embezzlement. By noon, the board of directors was calling emergency meetings. By evening, they were demanding Jonas's resignation. Every contractor working on Murphy properties found their contracts suddenly in violation of obscure clauses. Projects ground to a halt. Workers walked off sites. Lawsuits began piling up. Jonas watched his company implode from his office, his phone ringing non-stop with angry investors, panicked employees, threatening lawyers. He'd built Murphy Enterprises from the edge of bankruptcy after his father's death, spent 15 years making it profitable, making it matter. It took Mara's family 6 hours to reduce it to rubble. At hour 12, Caleb's media empire struck. The New York Times ran the headline, "Murphy Matriarch Accused of Elaborate Fraud Scheme." Below it, a photo of Susan at a charity gala, smiling in diamonds that had been purchased with embezzled money. The article was devastating. It detailed every payment to Dr. Vance, every transaction to Raymond Torres, every transfer to Christian Okafor. It quoted anonymous sources from inside the Murphy household, staff members who'd been paid to lie and now, terrified of legal consequences, were turning on Susan to save themselves. By hour 18, the story had gone national. Cable news picked it up. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended. Justice for Mara, Queen of New York, Murphy fraud. Susan's lover, Senator Castellano, was blindsided by reporters at a press conference. When confronted with photos of him and Susan in hotel rooms, he stammered denials that no one believed. His wife filed for divorce before sunset. At hour 36, Micah's security team located Christian Okafor in Accra and made their approach. They didn't threaten, didn't need to. They simply showed Christian photographs of his mother and siblings in Lagos, living in the apartment he'd rented with Susan's blood money. "You have a choice," the lead operative said. "Get on a plane to New York and tell the truth, or watch your family lose everything when the Nigerian authorities receive evidence that you participated in international fraud." Christian was on a plane within 3 hours. At hour 47, the custody hearing began. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Reporters lined the walls. Mara arrived in a black power suit, her hair in an elegant updo, diamonds at her throat, every inch the queen. Her brothers sat in the front row behind her, a wall of power and money. Jonas sat across the aisle, looking like a ghost, unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes, his eyes hollow. Susan sat beside him, her lawyer whispering frantically in her ear. Judge Catherine Reynolds entered, a severe woman in her 60s who'd presided over family court for 30 years and had seen every manipulation, every lie, every scheme. "Let's begin," she said. Gabriella Rossi stood. "Your Honor, we're here because my client's newborn daughter was stolen from her arms based on fraudulent DNA evidence manufactured by the defendant, Susan Murphy, through a conspiracy involving bribed medical professionals." She called Dr. Patricia Vance first. The doctor walked to the stand like she was walking to her execution. Her hands shook as she was sworn in. "Dr. Vance," Gabriella said, her voice gentle but implacable, "did you conduct the DNA test that identified Christian Okafor as baby Zara's biological father?" "Yes." "And were the results accurate?" Silence. Dr. Vance's eyes filled with tears. "Dr. Vance, I'll remind you that you're under oath. Were the DNA results you provided to Jonas Murphy accurate?" "No." The word came out as a sob. "No, they weren't accurate. I falsified them." The courtroom erupted. Judge Reynolds' gavel cracked like thunder. "Order." "Why did you falsify the results?" Gabriella asked. Dr. Vance's face crumpled. "Because Susan Murphy paid me $2 million. Because I have gambling debts, terrible debts, and the people I owe were threatening my children. Susan showed me photos of my kids, told me she could make the debts disappear, but only if I helped her. She wanted me to say the baby wasn't Jonas's. She wanted me to destroy Mara. And the actual DNA results? Jonas Murphy is the biological father. I conducted the real test myself. He's Zara's father. Christian Okafor was never tested. Susan just told me to use his name on the false report." Mara's hands clenched in her lap. Jonas made a sound like he'd been punched. Gabriella presented evidence next. Bank records showing the $2 million transfer from Susan to Dr. Vance, email exchanges discussing the plan, text messages coordinating the timing. Then she called Raymond Torres. The lab technician testified about his daughter's leukemia, about Susan's $400,000 payment, about falsifying the lab records to match Dr. Vance's fraudulent results. "She said it was the only way to save Camilla," Raymond wept. "I didn't want to lie, but my daughter was dying. What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to tell the truth," Judge Reynolds said coldly. "Continue." Finally, Gabriella called Christian Okafor. He entered the courtroom flanked by federal marshals, looking terrified and exhausted from his flight from Ghana. "Mr. Okafor," Gabriella began, "did you have a sexual or romantic relationship with Mara Slick Murphy?" "No, never. I swear on my mother's life." "Then why did DNA results identify you as baby Zara's father?" "Because Susan Murphy paid me $200,000 to participate in a scheme," Christian said, his accent thick with stress. "She hired me to work in her household. She told me to be near Mrs. Mara, to help her with tasks, to be photographed with her. She said it was for family security purposes. I didn't know she was editing the photos to make it look like we were having an affair." "Did Susan Murphy ask you to leave the country?" "Yes, she gave me the money and told me to go to Ghana and stay quiet. She said if I cooperated, I could keep the money and help my family. If I refused or told the truth, she'd have me deported and make sure my family in Nigeria suffered. And you're testifying now because... Christian looked at Mara for the first time. Because what she did was wrong. Because I have a mother too, and I can't imagine someone taking her baby away with lies. Because I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Judge Reynolds removed her glasses and stared at Susan Murphy with undisguised contempt. Mrs. Murphy, you orchestrated a conspiracy involving bribery, fraud, witness tampering, and perjury to steal a newborn infant from her mother. You destroyed lives, corrupted medical professionals, and manipulated your own son into believing his wife was unfaithful and his child was illegitimate. Susan's lawyer tried to interject. Your Honor, your client, Judge Reynolds interrupted, her voice ice, belongs in prison. This court awards full custody of Zara Murphy to her mother, Mara Slick Murphy, effective immediately. Jonas Murphy is granted supervised visitation for 2 hours weekly pending psychological evaluation. The restraining order remains in effect. Mr. Murphy, you will not approach Ms. Slick outside of these supervised visits. She turned to the court officers. Contact the district attorney. I want criminal charges filed against Susan Murphy, Dr. Patricia Vance, and Raymond Torres before the end of the day. The gavel fell. Mara stood, tears streaming down her face. Her brothers surrounded her, embracing her, celebrating the victory. Across the aisle, Jonas tried to approach. Mara, please, I didn't know. The DNA test seemed so real. I never meant... She turned to face him, and the look in her eyes stopped him cold. You had a year to choose me, Jonas. 1,000 chances to believe in me. You chose wrong every single time. Her voice was steady, final. Now live with it. She walked out of the courtroom. Jonas collapsed into his chair, his hands covering his face. Susan tried to approach him, reaching for his shoulder. Son, I did this for you. He shoved her hand away with such violence that she stumbled backward. Don't you ever touch me again, he said, his voice raw and broken. You're dead to me. Do you understand? You destroyed everything. You're dead to me. Susan's face showed fear for the first time since this whole scheme began, because she'd won the battle but lost the war. She'd removed Mara from Jonas's life, but in doing so, she'd also lost her son. And now, the wolves were circling. Chapter 8. The Empire Strikes Mara. Slick spent 1 year hiding her crown. Now she would spend the next months making everyone bow before it. The first night back in the penthouse, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed with Zara tucked against her chest, skin to skin, feeling her daughter's heartbeat synchronize with her own. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jonas pulling Zara from her arms, saw Susan's triumphant face, felt the tearing of her clothes and the blood on her lips. But Zara was here now, safe, breathing, real. Mara counted each tiny exhale, memorizing the weight of her daughter in her arms, the milky smell of her breath, the flutter of her eyelashes against soft cheeks. I'm never letting you go, she whispered into the darkness, never again. The next morning, Zara nursed for nearly an hour, making up for the days of separation. Mara's body had kept producing milk, despite the pain, despite the trauma, as if refusing to accept that her baby was gone. Now the relief of feeding her daughter was so intense, it brought fresh tears. My baby, Mara murmured against Zara's head. My sweet baby girl. Mama's here. Mama's got you. Elijah stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, watching the city below while his sister reclaimed her role as mother. Murphy Enterprises stock dropped another 40% today. The board forced Jonas to resign this morning. They're looking for buyers, but no one wants to touch it, not with the scandal attached. Good, Amelia said, settling beside Mara and stroking Zara's head with gentle fingers. Let them burn. Let it all burn. But Mara was focused entirely on her daughter. Zara had changed in just days of separation. Her eyes were more alert, her grip stronger, her cry more demanding. She'd grown in ways that Mara had missed, stolen moments that could never be recovered. The guilt was crushing. What if Zara had felt abandoned? What if those days apart had damaged something fundamental? She knows you, Amelia said softly, reading her daughter's thoughts. Look at her, baby. She knows exactly who her mama is. Zara's eyes were closed in nursing bliss, one tiny hand kneading Mara's breast, completely content. Mara let herself breathe. The next weeks blurred together in a haze of fierce motherhood and systematic revenge. Mara rarely left the penthouse. She nursed Zara on demand, changed endless diapers, rocked her through midnight crying sessions that left them both exhausted and clinging to each other. She set up a nursery that looked like it belonged in a palace. Imported Italian cribs, organic cotton in shades of cream and gold, toys handcrafted by artisans, a sound system that played lullabies in 12 languages. While she mothered with single-minded devotion, her family waged war. Gabriella filed 17 different lawsuits against the Murphy family, Dr. Vance, the laboratory, and even Christian Okafor for his complicity. Each one was airtight, backed by evidence that would make any jury weep and any judge rule in Mara's favor. Tobias bought the Murphy family mansion at foreclosure auction for $8 million, a fraction of its $40 million value. Instead of raising it or reselling it for profit, he transformed it into something that would haunt Susan Murphy for every day she remained alive, a shelter for women escaping domestic violence and abuse. Zara's house, he named it, after his niece who'd been stolen and reclaimed. The grand ballroom where Mara had been humiliated at her wedding reception, where Susan had spilled wine down her dress and accused her of theft, became a bright, cheerful daycare for single mothers' children. Susan's master bedroom suite, where she'd schemed and plotted Mara's destruction, became administrative offices for the shelter's staff. The dining room where Mara had been accused of stealing money became a communal kitchen teaching women job skills and providing hot meals. When the shelter opened, Caleb made sure every news outlet in the city covered it. Photos of Mara cutting the ribbon while holding Zara, standing in Susan's former bedroom surrounded by grateful women, talking about the importance of protecting the vulnerable. The New York Times headline, "Queen of New York turns Murphy Mansion into Palace of Redemption." The irony was beautiful and brutal and perfect. Meanwhile, Jonas Murphy discovered what it meant to lose everything. His company was gone, his reputation destroyed, his family name synonymous with fraud and abuse. He moved into a modest apartment in Queens, 2 rooms, no doorman, neighbors who recognized him and whispered as he passed. He tried to see Mara. The first time, he showed up at Slick Tower with flowers, white roses, her favorites. Security stopped him at the entrance. "I'm sorry, Mr. Murphy," the head guard said, not unkindly. "You're not on the approved visitor list." "Please," Jonas said, his voice breaking, "just tell her I'm here. I need to see my daughter. I need to apologize. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Jonas left the flowers with security. Mara had them thrown away unopened. The second time, he wrote a letter and tried to have it hand-delivered. The courier returned it unopened with a note from Amelia. "Supervised visitation only. Follow the court order or lose even that." The third time, he simply stood across the street from Slick Tower, staring up at the penthouse windows, where somewhere inside were the 2 people he loved most in the world. Micah's security team spotted him within minutes. "Mr. Murphy," the lead guard said, approaching him on the sidewalk, "you're violating the restraining order. Ms. Slick could have you arrested." "I'm across the street," Jonas said dully. "I'm not approaching her." "The order says 500 feet. You're at 200. I'm going to ask you once to leave. If you refuse, I call the police." Jonas looked up at the penthouse one more time, then walked away. He didn't try again after that. Instead, he showed up for his supervised visits with Zara every single Saturday. 2 hours every week, with Amelia as supervisor, in a neutral room in Mara's building. Mara was never there. She left the penthouse before Jonas arrived and didn't return until he was gone. But Jonas came anyway, week after week after week. He held Zara and read her board books in silly voices, changed her diapers, learned to make bottles even though Mara was still nursing. He sang lullabies off-key and let Zara grab his fingers with her surprisingly strong grip. "I'm so sorry, baby girl," he whispered every visit, his face buried in her soft hair. "Daddy was so stupid. Daddy hurt Mommy. I'm trying to be better. I promise I'm trying." Amelia watched and saw something she hadn't expected: genuine transformation. Jonas volunteered 30 hours a week at Zara's house, working with women escaping abuse. He listened to their stories of husbands who didn't believe them, families who chose the abuser, children taken away on false pretenses. He heard his own failures reflected in their pain. He donated every penny he earned beyond bare survival to Mara's charitable causes. He testified against his mother without hesitation, his testimony so damning that Susan's lawyers begged for a plea deal. He gave interviews to newspapers and television shows, taking full responsibility for his failures, never making excuses. "I failed my wife," he said in one interview that went viral. "I let my mother manipulate me into believing lies about the woman I loved. I stood silent while Mara was abused. I took our daughter from her arms based on fraudulent evidence I should have questioned. There's no redemption for that. I can only try to be better, for my daughter, and in memory of the man Mara thought she was marrying." He never asked for forgiveness, never demanded to see Mara, just showed up for Zara and bore the weight of his mistakes with quiet, relentless consistency. Meanwhile, Susan's trial concluded with devastating swiftness. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes, barely long enough to elect a foreman and take a single vote. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came a week later. The courtroom was packed again, everyone wanting to see the final fall of Susan Murphy. Judge Reynolds showed no mercy. 23 years in federal prison. You will be eligible for parole in 17 years, at which point you will be 81 years old. Given your health issues and the conditions in federal prison, Mrs. Murphy, it is likely you will die incarcerated. You have destroyed lives, corrupted institutions, and committed crimes that strike at the very heart of family and trust. May God have more mercy on your soul than you showed to others. Susan was led away in handcuffs, her face a mask of rage and disbelief. As she passed Mara in the gallery, she hissed, "This isn't over." Mara met her eyes calmly. "Yes, it is." And it was. Amelia's personal revenge came next, swift and thorough. She visited Susan in prison on a sunny afternoon in spring, signing in at the visitor's desk in a Chanel suit that cost more than most inmates would see in a lifetime of freedom. She sat across from Susan in the visiting room, separated by bulletproof glass and the unbridgeable distance between victor and vanquished. Susan looked diminished in her orange jumpsuit. Her hair was completely grey now, her face bare of makeup, her hands rough from laundry work. "Why are you here?" Susan asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "To tell you what I've done with your legacy." Amelia's smile was razor-sharp. "Your mansion is now a shelter for 43 women escaping abuse. They sleep in your bed, eat at your table, heal in the rooms where you once entertained senators and socialites. The Murphy fortune is gone. Every penny liquidated to pay legal fees, settlements and restitution. Your son won't speak to you. Your letters are returned unopened. Your lover has been disgraced and divorced. Your social circle has erased your name from every board, every registry, every memory." Susan's hands clenched into fists behind the glass. "And every woman who walks through the doors of Zara's house," Amelia continued, "knows it was the Queen of New York who saved them. The woman you tried to destroy. Your legacy isn't the Murphy name anymore, Susan. It's 43 women who get to rebuild their lives in the ruins of yours." Susan's voice cracked. "I hate you. I hate your daughter. I'd do it all again." "I know," Amelia said, standing. "That's why you'll die in here. Goodbye, Susan." She walked out without looking back. After 6 months of Jonas's consistent presence, Amelia finally mentioned it to Mara. "He's broken," Amelia said one evening while Mara nursed Zara before bed. "Completely. He worships that little girl, and he asks about you every single week. Not to see you, just to know if you're okay, if you're happy, if there's anything he can do to make things right." Mara's voice was ice. "Good, let him suffer. Baby." He stood silent while I bled, Mama. He took Zara from my arms. He believed every lie about me without questioning anything. Why should I care if he's suffering now? Amelia nodded, accepting this. But later that night, she left an envelope on Mara's dresser. Inside was a letter from Jonas. 30 pages, handwritten in the desperate scrawl of someone bleeding onto paper. Mara told herself she wouldn't read it. She lasted 3 hours before curiosity and something deeper, something she didn't want to name, won. The letter was devastating in its raw honesty. "Mara, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve to breathe the same air as you. But I need you to know, every day I wake up hating myself for what I did to you. I replay that moment you stood before me in torn clothes, bleeding, begging me to believe you, and I said nothing. I watched my mother beat you in the street and I did nothing. I let her manipulate me into believing you were unfaithful when every instinct should have told me you were incapable of betrayal. I took our daughter from your arms without even demanding a second DNA test, without investigating, without trusting the woman I claimed to love more than life itself. You were a queen, and I treated you like nothing. I don't ask for another chance. I don't ask for your love. Those things are dead, and I killed them with my cowardice and stupidity. I just ask that someday when Zara is old enough to ask about her father, you tell her I loved her mother more than life itself. I just loved her too late, and too poorly, and not nearly strong enough to matter when it counted." The letter continued for 30 pages, detailing every mistake, every moment of doubt, every time he'd chosen his mother's poison over Mara's truth. It was self-flagellation in written form, brutal and honest and heartbreaking. Mara's hands trembled as she read. Tears fell on the pages, smearing the ink in places. When she finished, she walked to the fireplace and held the letter over the flames, watching the heat shimmer around the paper. Her hand hovered there for a long moment, then she pulled back, folded the letter carefully, put it in her drawer next to the jewelry box that held her wedding ring. She didn't know why she couldn't burn it, but something in his words had cracked the ice around her heart, just slightly, just enough to hurt. Just enough to make her wonder if suffering was the same as change, or if change required something more. Chapter 9. The Mother's Reckoning. Amelia Slick had watched her daughter suffer in silence for a year. Silence was no longer an option. The revelation came on a quiet evening, 6 months after the custody battle. Mara sat in the penthouse living room, Zara asleep in her arms, while Amelia poured 2 glasses of wine and settled onto the opposite sofa. "I need to tell you something," Amelia began, her voice heavy with regret, "about why you were vulnerable to Susan's attack, about the real reason you signed that contract to hide your identity." Mara looked up, confused. "You mean the test you asked me to do, proving that Jonas loved me for myself, not my money?" "Yes, and it was the worst mistake I've ever made." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong, baby, so terribly wrong." The story came out slowly, painfully. 18 months prior, when Jonas had first proposed, Amelia had been suspicious. A man from a wealthy family wanting to marry her daughter seemed too convenient. She'd investigated Jonas's finances, discovered the Murphy fortune was smaller than their lifestyle suggested, found evidence of business struggles. "I thought he was using you," Amelia confessed. "I thought he saw your money as a solution to his family's problems. So I demanded the test. 1 year of hiding who you were, living as just Jonas's wife, proving that he and his family could love you without knowing your power." "But you were trying to protect me," Mara said. "I was being a controlling mother who didn't trust her daughter's judgment." Amelia's voice broke. "If I'd let you be yourself from the beginning, Susan never could have hurt you. You would have had your brother's protection, your wealth as a shield, your identity as armor. But I stripped all of that away and left you defenseless against that monster." Mara shifted Zara to her other arm, processing this. "You couldn't have known Susan would go that far." I should have known that any test which requires you to hide your truth is a test you shouldn't have to pass. Amelia reached across and took Mara's hand. Real love doesn't require you to diminish yourself. Real love celebrates who you are, not who you can pretend to be. And I'm so sorry I forgot that. The apology hung between them, heavy and necessary. What are you going to do about Susan now? Mara asked. Amelia's expression hardened. I already did it. She pulled out her phone and showed Mara the photos. Susan in prison, working in the laundry facility for 17 cents an hour. Susan eating in the cafeteria, isolated at a table while other inmates laughed nearby. Susan in her cell, staring at bare walls. She has no visitors except her court-appointed lawyer, Amelia said. Senator Castellano divorced his wife and left politics entirely. He wants nothing to do with Susan now that the affair is public. Susan's old friends have all abandoned her. Her country club membership was revoked. Every charity board she sat on removed her name. The Murphy family has disowned her. And Jonas? Mara asked quietly. Hasn't spoken to her since the trial. She writes him letters every week. He burns them unread. Mara looked down at Zara, thinking about family and betrayal, about mothers who destroy and mothers who protect. She's going to be in there for a long time, Mara said. 23 years, Amelia confirmed. She'll be in her 80s when she's released, if she survives that long. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Susan's destroyed life hanging over them. Do you feel satisfied? Amelia asked, now that she's lost everything. Mara considered the question honestly. Susan was in prison. The Murphy fortune was gone. Jonas was broken. Christian had testified and returned to Nigeria with enough money to start over honestly. Dr. Vance and Raymond Torres had both pled guilty to lesser charges in exchange for their testimony. Their licenses revoked, their careers destroyed, but avoiding prison time due to the coercion Susan had used. Everyone had paid a price. I don't feel satisfied, Mara said finally. I just feel tired and grateful I have Zara back. Everything else is just noise. What about Jonas? Amelia asked carefully. He's been showing up for a year now. Every single Saturday. He's never missed a visit. I know. He's changed, Mara. Really changed. The work he's doing at the shelter, the way he is with Zara, the public amends he's made. I don't want to talk about Jonas, Mara interrupted, but Amelia pressed on. You still love him. What I love is irrelevant. He chose his mother's lies over my truth. He stood silent while I bled. He took my baby from my arms. And he spent every day since trying to earn redemption. Redemption isn't earned in months, Mother. Maybe not in years. Maybe not ever. Amelia nodded, accepting this. You're right. But I want you to know, when you're ready, if you're ever ready, it's okay to forgive him. Not for his sake, for yours. Because holding on to this rage will only hurt you in the end. I'm not holding on to rage, Mara said. I'm holding on to my daughter. That's all that matters now. But later that night, after Amelia left and Zara was sleeping peacefully in her crib, Mara pulled out Jonas's letter again. She read it for the 10th time, tears streaming down her face. He'd included something new at the end, recent pages that Amelia must have given him permission to add. Updates on his work at the shelter, a story about a woman he'd helped escape her abuser, reflections on what he'd learned about himself, about entitlement, about the privilege of being believed when others weren't. I'm not the man you married anymore, he wrote. That man was weak and easily manipulated. That man chose comfort over truth. That man lost you. The man I'm becoming. I don't know if he's good enough for you. Probably not. But he's trying. Every day he's trying to be someone Zara could be proud of. Someone who might, maybe someday, deserve a fraction of the grace you've already shown by letting me see our daughter. Mara put the letter away and went to check on Zara. Her daughter slept peacefully, one tiny fist curled against her cheek. What do I do, baby girl? Mara whispered. Your father broke my heart, but he's your father, and he's trying so hard to be better. Does that count for anything? Or am I a fool for even considering it? Zara slept on, offering no answers. Outside the penthouse windows, New York City glittered like a field of diamonds. The Queen's kingdom, the empire she'd built, the power she'd reclaimed, it should have been enough. So why did her heart still ache for the man who'd destroyed her? Chapter 10. Queens and Kings. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the crown only the strongest can wear, and some crowns are too heavy for anyone but a queen. 2 years passed like water through fingers. Susan Murphy sat in her prison cell during year 3 of her sentence, her hair completely grey now, her hands rough from laundry work. She had no visitors. Her son had never come. Her letters to Jonas went unanswered, returned unopened. The other inmates avoided her. She was the rich woman who'd tried to steal a baby, and even criminals had standards. She would die there. She knew it now. The appeals had all failed. 23 years might as well be forever when you were approaching 70 with high blood pressure and a heart condition the prison doctor said was getting worse. Some nights, alone in her cell, Susan wondered if it had been worth it. Then she remembered Mara's face when Jonas took Zara, and decided yes. Even in defeat, even rotting in prison, that moment of victory had been sweet. She was a monster to the end. Meanwhile, Jonas Murphy had rebuilt himself from ashes, though not his wealth or status. He lived in a modest apartment in Queens, worked as a mid-level accountant, volunteered 30 hours weekly at Zara's house. The women there knew who he was, the man who'd failed his wife, who'd learned too late what truth looked like. He listened to their stories, held space for their pain, never made excuses, and every Saturday for 104 weeks straight, he showed up for his 2 hours with Zara. The little girl was 2.5 now, brilliant and beautiful with her father's grey eyes and her mother's strength. She could speak in full sentences, run on sturdy legs, laugh with pure joy, and she adored her father. Mara watched from hidden cameras Micah had installed. She couldn't bear to see Jonas in person, but she needed to see him with Zara, needed to know her daughter was safe, loved, cared for during those 2 hours. What she saw broke her heart in new ways. Jonas was patient and gentle, reading story after story in silly voices that made Zara giggle. He sang to her, played tea party, let her put stickers all over his face. He cried sometimes when Zara hugged him tight and said, "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, baby girl," he'd whisper back. So much. He asked Amelia about Mara every week. Not to see her. He'd long since accepted that door was closed, but just to know if she was happy, if she needed anything, if there was any way he could help. After 2 years, Amelia finally said to Mara, "He's not the same man. You need to see that." "I can't," Mara said simply. "Every time I think about seeing him, I remember standing in torn clothes while he did nothing. I remember him taking Zara from my arms. I can't get past it." "Then don't see him," Amelia said. "But maybe consider letting Zara see more of him. Unsupervised visits, overnight stays eventually. He's proven himself safe." Mara was still considering it when fate made the decision for her. The charity gala at the Plaza Hotel was Mara's triumph, her official public coronation as the Queen of New York. 1,000 guests, $10 million raised for domestic violence survivors in one night. The mayor presented her with the key to the city. The governor gave a speech about her contributions. Cameras flashed as Mara stood on stage in a golden gown, holding a crystal award, smiling for the first time in 2 years, with genuine happiness. She'd brought Zara to the gala, now old enough to behave at events like this, dressed in a tiny designer dress that made her look like a princess. Amelia was supposed to watch her, but the toddler was fast and clever. Halfway through the evening, Zara spotted someone she recognized near the kitchen doors and bolted. "Daddy!" she squealed, slipping past James Wellington's legs before he could grab her. James moved to intercept, hand on his earpiece, but froze when he saw who had caught her. Amelia went pale. Mara's heart stopped. Mara ran, her heels clicking on marble, her dress streaming behind her. She burst through the door and froze. Zara was in Jonas's arms. He was wearing a simple black vest over his dress shirt, clearing plates from the service area. He wasn't paid staff, he was volunteering. The former CEO of Murphy Enterprises now spent his evenings doing the invisible work no one else wanted to do. He was crying, holding their daughter, both of them completely oblivious to the chaos they'd caused. "Daddy!" Zara had her arms around his neck. "I found you!" "Hi, baby," Jonas whispered, his voice thick with tears. "Hi, my sweet girl. I didn't know you'd be here tonight. Mommy's here too. She won a big prize." "I know. Mommy's amazing. Mommy's the most incredible person in the world." Then Zara pulled back and touched Jonas's wet cheeks. "Daddy, why are you sad?" "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm happy. So happy to see you." Zara smiled and grabbed his hand. "Come meet Mommy. You can see her prize." Mara's breath caught as her daughter pulled Jonas toward her, completely innocent of the history, the pain, the impossible distance between her parents. Jonas saw Mara and stopped dead. They stared at each other across the hallway, the queen in gold and diamonds, the broken man in a volunteer's vest, and between them the child they'd created in love before everything shattered. "Mommy!" Zara tugged Jonas forward. "This is my daddy. Can Daddy come home with us?" The question hung in the air like prayer. Jonas gently untangled his hand from Zara's. He knelt down to her level, his voice soft. "Daddy can't come home, sweetheart. But I love you so much. And I love Mommy so much. And that's enough, okay?" Zara's face scrunched in confusion. "But if you love each other, why don't you live together? That's what people who love each other do." Out of the mouths of babes. Mara's eyes filled with tears. Jonas stayed kneeling, not looking at her, giving her space to decide what happened next. "Zara," Mara said softly. "Come here, baby." Zara ran to her mother. Mara picked her up, held her close, then looked at Jonas. "Thank you for taking care of her," she said. The first word she'd spoken to him in 2 years. Jonas's hands trembled. "Always. I'll always take care of her. Both of you. However you'll let me." Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, Mara made a decision. "Zara, would you like to spend next Saturday with Daddy? The whole day, just you two?" Zara's face lit up. "Really? Really?" Jonas stood slowly, his expression stunned. "Mara, you don't have to—" "I'm not doing this for you," she interrupted. "I'm doing it for her. She deserves to know her father, and you've earned the chance to show her who you've become." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a crack in the wall. Jonas nodded, not trusting his voice. Mara turned and carried Zara back toward the gala, pausing at the doorway. Without looking back, she said, "Don't make me regret this." "I won't," Jonas promised. "I swear on everything I have left, I won't." She left. Jonas stood alone in the service hallway and wept. 6 months later, the arrangement had transformed. Jonas picked Zara up every Saturday for full days together. They went to parks, museums, the zoo. He texted Mara photos throughout the day, Zara on a carousel, Zara feeding ducks, Zara asleep in his arms on the subway ride home. He never asked for more, never pushed for conversations beyond logistics, just showed up for his daughter, every single time, without fail. One Saturday, Zara got a fever. Jonas called immediately, bringing her back to Mara's penthouse hours early. "I won't stay," he said at the door, Zara whimpering in his arms. "But I brought children's medicine and her favorite stuffed animal. If you need anything, come in," Mara heard herself say. Jonas froze. "What?" "She's sick. She wants both of us. Come in." They spent the afternoon together for the first time in 2 years. Jonas sat on one end of the sofa, Mara on the other, with sick Zara between them. They took turns reading stories, bringing water, checking her temperature. It was painfully domestic, painfully normal, painfully everything they'd lost. When Zara finally fell asleep, Mara carried her to the bedroom. She returned to find Jonas standing, ready to leave. "Thank you for letting me stay," he said quietly. I know how hard this must be for you. Mara studied him. 2 years had aged him, but also refined him. The entitled, easily manipulated man she'd married was gone. In his place was someone humbler, wiser, scarred by his failures and determined to do better. "Do you still love me?" she asked suddenly. Jonas's eyes widened, then filled with tears. "Every second of every day, even though I don't deserve to, even though I know you'll never feel the same way again. Yes, I love you." "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," Mara said honestly. "You broke something in me that might not be fixable." "I know. But Zara deserves a father who's present, really present, not just Saturdays." Jonas's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we try supervised dinners, once a week, you, me, and Zara. See if we can be parents together without everything falling apart." "Mara, I'm not promising forgiveness," she interrupted. "I'm not promising we'll ever be what we were, but I'm willing to try building something new. For her, and maybe for us. But it's going to take time. Years, probably. And you have to be okay with that." "I'm okay with whatever you're willing to give," Jonas said. "If all you ever want is co-parenting dinners once a week for the rest of our lives, I'll show up grateful every single time." Mara nodded slowly. "Okay, then we start next week." He left before she could change her mind, and Mara sat in her living room, queen of an empire, ruler of a kingdom, powerful and feared and respected by everyone, but still just a woman who'd loved a man who'd broken her heart, who was trying to decide if giving him another chance made her wise or foolish. She looked at the photo on her mantel, her and Zara at the charity gala, both of them glowing. Then she looked at the drawer where Jonas's letter still lived, read so many times the pages were soft as silk. Forgiveness wasn't weakness, but it wasn't easy either. It was a choice, one she'd have to make every day, probably for years, maybe forever. But as she checked on Zara, sleeping peacefully now, fever breaking, Mara thought maybe, just maybe, her daughter deserved parents who tried, even if trying meant risking her heart all over again. The Queen had reclaimed her power, her daughter, her dignity. Whether she reclaimed love was a choice only she could make. And for the first time in 2 years, Mara Slick was ready to choose hope over hurt, one careful, terrifying step at a time. The end.